Story number 1. The House on Hollow Isle. I never believed in curses or haunted places. Growing up in Chicago, surrounded by the relentless pace of urban life, I dismissed ghost stories as nothing more than exaggerated tales told around campfires. But that all changed the summer I decided to escape the city's chaos with a group of friends for a weekend camping trip on Hollow Isle, a secluded spot in the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. Our group consisted of 5 friends: myself, Mark, an avid outdoorsman with a knack for storytelling; Sarah, a graphic designer seeking inspiration from nature; Tom, a history buff fascinated by abandoned structures; Lisa, a photographer eager to capture the island's untouched beauty; and Jenna, our planner and the glue that held us all together. We had rented a small rowboat and packed our gear, excited for the adventure that awaited us. As we approached Hollow Isle, the sun began its descent, casting a golden hue over the water. The island emerged from the mist, a rugged landscape of dense forests and rocky shores. In the center stood an old wooden house, its paint peeling and windows shattered, a relic from a bygone era. Tom's eyes lit up with excitement. "This is perfect," he exclaimed. "Imagine the stories this place could tell." We anchored near the shore and set up our camp a short distance away from the house. The first night was serene, the sounds of the lake lapping against the shore blending with the rustle of leaves in the wind. We shared stories around the campfire, the flickering flames casting long shadows that danced on the ground. As midnight approached, an uneasy silence settled over the island, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Suddenly, Sarah spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her eyes darting towards the old house. I strained to listen, but all I could hear was the gentle breeze. "Probably just a branch falling or something," I replied, trying to reassure her. But Jenna, always the observant one, nodded slowly. "It's coming from the house. We should check it out." Tom's excitement returned. "Absolutely. Let's see what we can find." We grabbed our flashlights and approached the house cautiously. The door creaked ominously as Tom pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty rooms. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust particles floated in the beam of our lights, illuminating the remnants of a life long forgotten. Furniture lay scattered, covered in white sheets, and old photographs hung crookedly on the walls. Lisa began to explore, her camera capturing the eerie beauty of the abandoned home. "This place is incredible," she murmured, taking pictures of the faded wallpaper and broken windows. Mark, ever the storyteller, started weaving tales of the house's past inhabitants, his voice echoing through the empty halls. In one of the bedrooms, Tom discovered a dusty journal lying on a decaying dresser. "Guys, look at this," he called out, his voice tinged with excitement. We gathered around as he opened the journal, the pages yellowed with age. The entries were dated back to the 1920s, written by a man named Edward Holloway. His words spoke of isolation and despair, detailing how he and his family had been trapped on the island by a mysterious force. "We cannot leave," one entry read, "no matter how hard we try. Something keeps us bound here, preventing our escape." A chill ran down my spine as I read the last entry, dated just days before the family's disappearance. "There's something wrong with this place," Edward had written. "It's like the island itself is alive, watching us, keeping us here forever." As we delved deeper into the journal, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier, the silence pressing in on us from all sides. Suddenly, we heard it, a soft thumping sound coming from upstairs. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Did you guys hear that?" Sarah whispered, her grip tightening on Mark's arm. Tom, ever the brave one, suggested we investigate. "Let's go upstairs and see what's causing the noise." We ascended the creaky staircase, the thumping growing louder with each step. As we reached the top, the sound abruptly stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. In the center of the hallway stood a large, cracked mirror, its surface dusty and streaked. As we approached, Jenna shone her flashlight on it, revealing a message scrawled in what looked like dried blood: "Leave now." A wave of fear washed over us as we backed away from the mirror. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, trapping us in the hallway. Panic set in as we tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature dropped, our breaths visible in the cold air, and an unnatural darkness filled the room, making it difficult to see. Lisa screamed, her flashlight flickering wildly. What's happening? Mark tried to keep calm, though his voice wavered. Stay together. We need to find another way out. As we moved through the house, the sense of being watched intensified. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and faint whispers echoed through the halls, their words indistinct but filled with malice. We stumbled upon another room, the floor covered in deep scratches and bloodstains, evidence of a violent struggle. In the far corner, we saw the remnants of a family dinner, plates broken, food scattered, and a bloodied chair. This is sick, Tom muttered, horrified by the sight. What happened here? Before we could process the horror, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness. Panic turned to terror as we heard footsteps approaching, their heavy thuds resonating through the empty house. The door we had been trying to open swung open on its own, revealing the outside once more. Without thinking, we ran towards the exit, the sound of footsteps chasing us until we burst out into the night air. The cool breeze felt like a balm against the oppressive darkness we had just escaped. Breathing heavily, we looked back at the house, its windows like dark, soulless eyes watching us leave. As we made our way back to the boat, we realized with growing horror that our equipment had been moved more than 50 meters from where we had set up camp. Our maps were strewn across the ground, and our radio had been smashed, leaving us unable to call for help. Determined to leave, we began paddling back to shore, but something felt terribly wrong. When we reached the mainland the next morning, we were relieved to find that our boat was still docked where we had left it. However, the relief was short-lived. One of our friends, Jenna, was nowhere to be found. We searched the island frantically, calling out her name, but she had vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks as we struggled to piece together what had happened. The authorities were baffled by the disappearance, unable to find any evidence of Jenna's whereabouts. The only clue was the bloodstained journal we had found, its pages torn and smeared, as if someone had tried to destroy the evidence. We were eventually rescued, found by a search party after 3 days of desperate calls and widespread concern. The island was in disarray, with signs of a violent confrontation scattered throughout the remnants of the old house. Jenna was never found, her fate a lingering mystery that haunted us all. Years later, the memory of that night still lingers in my mind like a dark shadow. I often find myself staring at old photographs of Hollow Isle, the once majestic house now reduced to a haunting relic of the past. The whispers and footsteps echo in my dreams, a constant reminder of the darkness that once consumed us on that forsaken island. If you ever find yourself venturing into the remote corners of Lake Michigan, heed my warning. Some places are better left untouched, their secrets buried beneath layers of time and despair. For in the heart of Hollow Isle lies a darkness that watches and waits, ready to ensnare those who dare to uncover its eternal secrets. Story number 2. The Woman in White. I never paid much attention to ghost stories. Growing up in the heart of Kansas, surrounded by vast fields and the quiet hum of rural life, tales of apparitions and restless spirits seemed like nothing more than campfire legends meant to entertain and spook. But that all changed one cold, clear night when the line between myth and reality blurred in the most terrifying way. It was late October, and the night air was crisp with the promise of winter. I had just finished a long day at the local hardware store, closing up shop and heading home in my aging Ford pickup. The roads were empty, the only sounds the distant howls of coyotes and the crunch of gravel beneath my tires. The full moon cast a silvery glow over the landscape, illuminating the endless stretches of cornfields and the dense woods that bordered the road. As I drove down the familiar highway, my thoughts drifted to the upcoming holidays and the warmth of home awaiting me. My wife, Sarah, and our teenage daughter, Emily, were both asleep, tired from their own hectic days. The solitude of the drive was comforting, a chance to unwind before settling in for the night. Around midnight, just as the moon reached its zenith, I saw her. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, a common enough sight on these lonely stretches. A woman in a flowing white dress stood by the roadside, her figure silhouetted against the bright moonlight. Her hair was long and dark, cascading down her back like a waterfall, and she seemed to be waiting for someone. I slowed the truck to a stop, the headlights casting a harsh beam on her pale face. "Hey there," I called out, rolling down my window. "Need a ride?" She turned her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and ethereal. I'm lost. I hesitated for a moment, scanning the empty road behind us. Sure thing. Hop in. She climbed into the passenger seat, the cool night air brushing against her skin. As I drove, I couldn't help but notice how unnaturally still she was, her eyes fixed on the road ahead with an intensity that felt almost otherworldly. We spoke little, the silence between us comfortable yet tinged with an unspoken tension. After a few miles, I glanced over at her, curiosity getting the better of me. Where are you headed? She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. Anywhere, she replied, her gaze unsettlingly empty. There was a hollow depth to her eyes, a darkness that seemed to draw me in and hold me captive. I just need to get home. I nodded, trying to push the unease aside. All right. How about we get you to the next town? It's about 20 miles from here. She nodded slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. That sounds perfect. As we continued driving, the road seemed to stretch on endlessly, the familiar landmarks fading into obscurity. The headlights illuminated nothing but the barren expanse of the desert, the only signs of life being the occasional tumbleweed drifting across the pavement. Minutes turned into hours, and the night grew colder, the chill seeping into the truck's interior despite the heater running. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, 1:47 a.m. Are you sure you're okay? I asked, concern lacing my voice. She nodded again, but there was a sadness in her eyes that tugged at my heart. I just want to go home, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the open window, causing her to shiver. It's freezing out here, I remarked, pulling the window back up. Maybe we should find a place to stop and warm up. She smiled faintly, a gesture that didn't reach her eyes. That would be nice. I scanned the road for any sign of a rest area or gas station, but the highway remained deserted, the only structures miles away. Just as I began to lose hope, a flicker of light appeared in the distance, a small, run-down gas station glowing softly under the moonlight. Looks like there's one up ahead, I said, pointing towards the light. As we approached, the station's neon sign buzzed erratically, casting an eerie glow on the deserted pumps. I pulled into the parking lot, the engine idling as we both sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on us. Let's go inside, I suggested, feeling the need for warmth and the semblance of normalcy. We stepped out of the truck, the cold air biting at our skin. The interior of the gas station was dimly lit, cluttered with old vending machines and faded advertisements. An elderly man sat behind the counter, his eyes narrow and suspicious as we entered. Evening, I greeted him. We were wondering if you could help us. Our radio picked up some strange coordinates, and we think we might be lost. The man eyed us warily, his gaze shifting between the two of us. Coordinates, huh? Well, this area isn't exactly well known. What exactly are you looking for? I explained the situation, mentioning the radio transmission and our need to find our way to the next town. He listened intently, nodding slowly. I see. You might want to check the old lighthouse over by the ridge. Not much there anymore, but it might help. Thanks, I replied, grateful for any lead. As we left the gas station, I glanced back at the elderly man, but he was gone, replaced by the same empty lot that had greeted us earlier. Shaking off the odd encounter, we headed towards the lighthouse, the headlights cutting through the darkness as we navigated the winding road. When we arrived, the lighthouse stood tall and imposing, its once bright beacon now dim and lifeless. I stepped out of the truck, pulling my jacket tighter around me. Let's see if we can find any clues. She followed closely, her presence a constant reminder of the night's growing strangeness. As we explored the grounds, I noticed that the landscape seemed to shift subtly, the terrain around us morphing in ways that defied logic. The air grew colder, the silence oppressive as if the very environment was holding its breath. Inside the lighthouse, the spiral staircase loomed ahead, its steps worn and slippery. We should check the top, I suggested, the need for answers driving me forward. She nodded, and together we began the ascent, the sounds of our footsteps echoing through the hollow structure. As we reached the top, the view was breathtaking, endless stretches of desert, the moon casting long shadows over the sand. But amidst the beauty, something felt deeply wrong, an unsettling energy that hung in the air. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life again, the same cold voice repeating the coordinates. Coordinates: 34.0522 degrees north, 118.2437 degrees west. I felt a chill run down my spine, the realization dawning on me that we were being led somewhere, or something was guiding us. "We need to go back," I urged, but she was already moving towards the edge of the platform, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Before I could reach her, a shadowy figure materialized beside her, the outline of a woman in white standing silent and still. Her eyes were empty voids, her face pale and gaunt, yet her presence was impossibly strong. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally in the confined space. I stepped forward, fear gripping me. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure remained silent, her gaze never wavering. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, the weight of her sorrow and pain pressing down on me. "Please, let us go," I pleaded, trying to back away, but the air around us seemed to constrict, the darkness growing thicker. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled, the structure of the lighthouse groaning under an unseen force. "We have to leave now," I shouted, grabbing her hand to pull her away, but she resisted, her strength unnatural. The shadows around us twisted and contorted, forming grotesque shapes that reached out like tendrils. Panic surged through me as I struggled to free her, but the figure's grip only tightened, pulling me into the darkness. The world spun around me, the screams of the past and the whispers of the present merging into a cacophony of fear. I felt myself being dragged through the storm of shadows, the boundaries between reality and nightmare dissolving. When I finally broke free, I was back in the truck, the engine running smoothly as if nothing had happened. I glanced at the dashboard clocks, all frozen at 12:07 a.m., the exact moment the light had appeared. Confusion and fear clouded my mind as I tried to comprehend the surreal experience. We sped away from the lighthouse, the radio silent once more, the coordinates etched into my memory. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, casting light on the desolate road ahead. But the feeling of being watched lingered, an invisible presence that refused to let go. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that night haunted me relentlessly. Emily and Jake were both disturbed by nightmares, their innocent minds unable to grasp the horrors we had faced. Sarah and I grew distant, the weight of our experience driving a wedge between us. The frozen clocks in the truck remained a constant reminder of the night we encountered the unknown, the boundaries of time and reality shattered by forces beyond our understanding. One evening, unable to sleep, I returned to the site of the lighthouse, hoping to find some closure. The structure stood silent, its spiral staircase abandoned and untouched. As I stood there, the radio in my truck flickered to life, the same cold voice echoing through the speakers. Coordinates: 34.0522 degrees north, 118.2437 degrees west. My blood ran cold as I realized that the coordinates pointed directly to Los Angeles, a place we had yet to visit on our journey. The engine died again, the car shuddering to a halt as the blue light appeared once more intense and menacing than before. It hovered above us, pulsing with dark energy that seemed to draw us in. Desperate to escape, I tried to restart the engine, but the car remained unresponsive. The blue light intensified, filling the windshield with an otherworldly glow. I felt an overwhelming sense of inevitability, the weight of destiny pressing down on me. "We have to leave," I whispered to Sarah, who sat beside me, her eyes wide with fear. But no matter how fast we drove, the light followed, always appearing in the rearview mirror, its presence relentless. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the car racing down the highway, the blue light a constant shadow on our trail. Every time I glanced back, the light seemed to grow larger, its eyes burning with an unholy intensity. Finally, I decided to stop near a gas station, hoping to regain control of the situation. As we pulled into the lot, the engine started smoothly, and the light dissipated as suddenly as it had appeared. Exhausted and shaken, we got out of the car, the dawn breaking around us, bringing a sense of temporary relief. The gas station was quiet, the only sounds the distant chirping of birds and the soft rustle of leaves. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but it had no signal. Sarah clung to me, her face pale and eyes haunted by the night's events. "We need to leave now," I insisted, the fear still gripping me tightly. As we loaded our belongings, I noticed something strange. Our car's clocks were still frozen at 12:07 a.m., despite the hours that had passed. Confusion and terror took hold as I realized that we were trapped in a loop, our journey forever marked by the haunting presence of the woman in white. That morning, we left Kansas behind, the road stretching out before us like an endless path of uncertainty. The experiences we endured left scars that time could not heal, the memories of empty eyes and ghostly whispers haunting our every step. The woman in white remained a mystery, her sorrowful presence a reminder that some encounters defy explanation, leaving us forever changed by the night we faced the unknown. Years have passed since that fateful trip, but the echoes of that night still resonate within me. The coordinates on the radio, the frozen clocks, and the relentless blue light serve as reminders of the thin veil between our world and the supernatural forces that lurk just beyond our perception. I often find myself gazing out at the horizon, wondering if the woman in white is still watching, waiting for her next encounter with the living. If you ever find yourself driving alone through the quiet stretches of rural Kansas, heed this warning, trust your instincts and respect the unknown. For in the stillness of the night, amidst the vastness of the desert, there are shadows that watch and whispers that echo, ready to claim those who dare to venture too far into the darkness. Story number 3. The Enigmatic Broadcast. I never believed that a routine road trip could unravel the very fabric of reality. Growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, I was no stranger to the vastness of the desert, its endless expanse a source of both comfort and isolation. But nothing could have prepared me for the night that changed everything for my family and me. It was late September 2003, and my wife, Lisa, our 16-year-old daughter, Emily, and our 8-year-old son, Jake, were embarking on a cross-country journey to visit relatives in California. We decided to take the scenic route through Arizona's rugged landscapes, eager to spend quality time together away from the hustle and bustle of daily life. The trip had been going smoothly. The open road stretched out before us, the desert night illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. The hum of the engine was a comforting backdrop as we shared stories and laughed about old memories. Lisa handled the navigation, her fingers deftly moving across the map, while Emily busied herself with her favorite music playlist. Jake, ever the inquisitive child, pressed his face against the window, fascinated by the constellations overhead. Around midnight, as the highway wound through a particularly desolate stretch of the desert, an unusual silence settled over the car. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the tires on asphalt and the occasional whisper of wind through the cracked windows. I glanced at the radio, intending to change the station, but to my surprise, it was already on, static filling the speakers before a clear, cold voice broke through. Coordinates, 34.0522 degrees north, 118.2437 degrees west. Startled, I reached for the radio, my heart pounding. Lisa, did you turn on the radio? She shook her head, equally confused. No, I thought I turned it off earlier. Jake looked up, his innocent curiosity piqued. Dad, what are those numbers? I felt a chill run down my spine as I took out my phone, pulling up the map app to input the coordinates. To my horror, they pinpointed our exact location on the highway we were traveling. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the situation. It must be some kind of malfunction, I muttered, though the unease in my gut told me otherwise. The radio remained silent after the initial broadcast, but the impact had already set my thoughts spinning. I tried to dismiss it as a random glitch, but the feeling of being watched lingered, an invisible presence pressing in on us from all sides. As we continued driving, the temperature inside the car began to drop sharply. I reached for the thermostat, but the display froze at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. A sudden shudder ran through the vehicle, and the engine coughed before dying entirely. The car coasted to a stop, the dashboard lights flickering erratically before stabilizing in a dim glow. Great, Lisa sighed, frustration etched on her face. Now what? Before I could respond, a strange blue light pierced the darkness, emanating from the horizon. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, intense yet ethereal, casting an otherworldly glow over the barren landscape. My pulse quickened as I watched the light grow larger, moving steadily closer until it hovered directly above us. Jake, Emily, stay inside the car, I instructed, my voice trembling. But fear was already gripping us, making it difficult to maintain composure. The light pulsed rhythmically, as if in sync with my racing heart, and an indescribable energy seemed to emanate from its core. Minutes felt like hours as we sat frozen, the blue light dominating our vision. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the light began to dissipate, retreating back into the night sky. The temperature inside the car returned to normal, and I fumbled with the ignition, desperately trying to restart the engine. After several failed attempts, the car roared back to life, the dashboard clocks now frozen at 12:07 a.m., the exact moment the light had vanished. Relief washed over me as I turned the car around, eager to put the strange incident behind us. But as we resumed our journey, the weight of what had happened pressed down on us, an unspoken fear lingering in the air. The rest of the drive was unnervingly silent, the usual sounds of the desert night absent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When we finally reached our destination the next morning, exhausted and shaken, we noticed something peculiar. The clocks in the car, my watch, Lisa's clock, and even the digital display on Jake's toy, were all stuck at 12:07 a.m. No matter how many times we tried to reset them, they refused to change, as if time itself had been frozen at that precise moment. Over the following days, we couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, an unseen presence lurking just beyond our sight. Emily reported hearing faint whispers at night, voices speaking in a language she couldn't understand. Jake, always imaginative, insisted that shadows danced in the corners of his room, their movements silent and deliberate. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into researching the coordinates broadcasted by the radio. They pointed to a small, uninhabited stretch of highway known for its eerie legends and unexplained phenomena. Locals spoke of strange occurrences, cars stopping abruptly, unexplained lights in the sky, and a sense of being trapped in a time loop. One evening, unable to sleep, I decided to revisit the spot where our car had stalled. The highway was deserted, the desert stretching out in all directions under the starlit sky. As I stood there, memories of that night resurfaced, the radio's haunting message, the blue light's ethereal presence, and the oppressive silence that followed. A gust of wind rustled the dry brush, and for a moment, I thought I saw a faint shadow moving at the edge of my vision. My heart raced as I turned to face it, but there was nothing there, only the endless desert and the vast expanse of the night sky. Returning home, I shared my experiences with Lisa, who suggested that we seek help from a local paranormal investigator. Skeptical yet desperate for answers, we agreed to meet with an expert named Dr. Helen Carter, known for her work in unexplained phenomena. Dr. Carter listened intently as we recounted our ordeal, her expression thoughtful. "What you experienced aligns with reports of a temporal anomaly," she explained. "The coordinates and the frozen time suggest that your car was caught in a sort of time loop or dimensional rift. The blue light could have been a manifestation of energy trying to stabilize the event." She recommended further investigation, but the idea of delving deeper into the unknown filled us with both hope and dread. Nevertheless, driven by the desire to understand what had happened, we agreed to collaborate with her. In the weeks that followed, we participated in various experiments and observations under Dr. Carter's guidance. We set up equipment along the highway, hoping to capture any residual energy or anomalies. But each attempt only heightened the sense of unease, as if the very act of seeking answers was inviting more questions. One night, as we monitored the equipment from our home, the radio suddenly flickered to life once more. The cold voice returned, reading a new set of coordinates, 34.0522 degrees north, 118.2437 degrees west. My blood ran cold as I realized these pointed directly to Los Angeles, a place we had yet to visit on our journey. Panic set in as the engine of our car died again, just as it had before. The blue light reappeared, even more intense and menacing, casting long shadows across the desert. This time, it hovered ominously above us, pulsating with a dark energy that seemed to draw us in. We attempted to flee, but our attempts were futile. The road twisted and contorted, leading us back to the same spot we had initially experienced. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping once more as the blue light began to merge with the night sky, creating an eerie, otherworldly spectacle. As the light enveloped us, a sense of inevitability settled over us. We felt ourselves being pulled into the very fabric of time and space, our surroundings blurring into a vortex of energy and light. The clocks remained frozen, a constant reminder of the moment we were trapped in this perpetual loop. When the light finally dissipated, we found ourselves standing alone on the highway, the desert calm and silent as if nothing had happened. The radio was off, and the car's engine hummed gently, the clock still stuck at 12:07 a.m. We looked around, confusion and fear etched on our faces, unsure of how much time had passed or what we had truly experienced. In the days that followed, life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the memories of that night lingered like a shadow over us. The coordinates broadcasted by the radio remained a mystery, their origins and purpose elusive and unfathomable. We never spoke of what truly happened, the fear of not being believed keeping the truth locked away in our hearts. Years later, I still drive through Arizona's desolate highways, the vast desert stretching out before me like a canvas of endless possibilities and hidden dangers. The memory of that night remains vivid, a haunting reminder that some mysteries are best left unsolved and some roads should never be traveled. If you ever find yourself alone on a remote highway, heed the silence and respect the unknown. For in the stillness of the desert lies a truth that transcends time and space, a presence that watches and waits, ready to ensnare those who dare to uncover its enigmatic secrets. Story number 4. Shadow over Everest. I never imagined that climbing Everest would push me to the brink of reality. Growing up in Denver, surrounded by the towering Rockies, I developed an early fascination with mountains. By 2003, I had joined several expeditions, each time seeking the thrill and solitude that only high altitudes could offer. But nothing could have prepared me for the experience that awaited my team in the unforgiving expanse of the Himalayas. Our team consisted of 5, myself, Alex, a seasoned climber with a penchant for solitude, Maya, a geologist passionate about mountain formations, Raj, our fearless leader with years of expedition experience, Elena, a photographer eager to capture the mountain's beauty, and Tom, a navigator whose maps were as precise as his instincts. We had meticulously planned every detail, ensuring we were well equipped for the challenges ahead. The ascent began smoothly, the crisp mountain air filling our lungs as we made our way through the base camp. The snow-capped peaks gleamed under the morning sun, a stark contrast to the dense fog that enveloped the lower slopes. As days turned into weeks, our progress was steady, each step bringing us closer to the summit. The camaraderie among us was strong, the shared goal uniting our diverse backgrounds and skills. On the 4th day of our climb, as we approached a particularly treacherous section near Camp 4, Maya pointed towards a distant peak. "Look," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "Do you see that?" In the fading light, a shadowy figure stood atop a ridge, its silhouette stark against the vibrant sky. At first, we dismissed it as a fellow climber or perhaps a reflection playing tricks on our tired eyes. But something about the figure felt off, unnaturally still, its presence almost oppressive. "Probably just another team," Raj suggested, his voice steady despite the unease creeping into our hearts. "Let's keep moving." We pressed on, the shadow lingering in our peripheral vision, a silent sentinel watching our every move. The higher we climbed, the thinner the air became, and fatigue began to set in. Yet, the figure remained, a constant reminder of the unknown forces that seemed to inhabit these mountains. That night, as we set up camp near a narrow crevasse, the atmosphere grew tense. The wind howled through the passes, and the temperature plummeted, forcing us to huddle closer to our tents for warmth. It was then that we heard it, the faint sound of whispers, carried by the icy breeze. At first, we thought it was the wind weaving through the rocks, but the whispers grew louder, more distinct, spoken in a language we couldn't comprehend. Elena clutched her camera, trying to capture the ethereal sounds on tape. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. Raj nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond our camp. "Stay alert," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. As the night deepened, the whispers intensified, weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to penetrate our very souls. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, fleeting glimpses of movement that vanished when we turned to look. Tom, usually unflappable, paced nervously, his hands trembling as he tried to steady his nerves. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the camp, followed by the sound of something large shuffling through the snow. "Stay inside," Raj commanded, his voice firm. "Lock the tents." We huddled together, the oppressive silence broken only by the relentless whispers and the distant, guttural growls that reverberated through the mountains. Hours passed in a state of heightened fear, the night stretching endlessly as we waited for dawn. The next morning, exhaustion weighed heavily upon us. We emerged from our tents to find the camp in disarray. The tents had been moved over 50 meters from their original positions, our equipment scattered and damaged. Blood-red scratch marks marred the snow around us, evidence of a violent encounter that left no trace of the assailant. Tom was missing. Tom! I called out, my voice cracking with panic. Where are you? Maya shook her head, her face pale. He's not here. We need to find him. Raj led us back towards the area where our camp had been disturbed, the remnants of our previous night's ordeal haunting every step. As we searched, the wind carried the whispers once more, now intertwined with the sounds of desperate cries and muffled screams. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, as if the mountain itself was closing in on us. Hours turned into days as we scoured the vast expanse of the Himalayas, our efforts hampered by relentless weather and the unnerving feeling of being watched. On the 5th day, we discovered Tom's body near a frozen waterfall, his eyes wide with terror and his face contorted in pain. The snow around him bore large, inhuman footprints, far bigger than any humans, leading away into the abyss. It wasn't a bear, Maya whispered, her voice trembling. Those footprints, they're not animal tracks. Despair set in as we realized the truth. Tom had been hunted by something far more sinister than any wildlife we had encountered. The shadowy figure we had seen was no mere climber, it was a malevolent presence, a spectral entity bound to the mountains, feeding off our fear and desperation. Determined to survive, we pressed on, each step a battle against the oppressive forces that sought to claim us. The whispers followed us, growing louder and more insistent, their messages twisted and dark. The shadows moved with a life of their own, always just out of reach, always watching. On the 7th day, as we neared the summit, the final barrier between us and the sky, the entity made its presence known. A towering figure emerged from the clouds, its form shifting and contorting with every movement. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire, and its voice echoed through the mountains, a chilling blend of sorrow and rage. "Why do you trespass?" it demanded, the language unintelligible yet filled with palpable anger. Raj stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. "We mean no harm. We're just trying to reach the summit." The entity paused, its gaze piercing through us. "The mountain is not yours to conquer," it intoned, the air growing thick with its power. "Leave now, or join those who have lost their way." But we had come too far to turn back. Ignoring the warning, we continued our ascent, driven by the unyielding spirit of human determination. As we reached the final stretch, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, the mountain itself seeming to shake with the fury of the entity. In a moment of pure terror, the ground beneath us gave way, plunging us into darkness. I awoke on the frozen slopes, disoriented and broken, the summit lost to the mists that now enveloped us. The entity's presence lingered, a silent reminder of the mountain's wrath and the thin line between ambition and hubris. We descended the mountain, forever changed by the horrors we had witnessed. The memories of whispers in an unknown language, shadowy figures watching us from afar, and the desperate screams of those who had fallen before us haunted our every step. Our expedition ended in tragedy, the mountains reclaiming their secrets and leaving us with scars that would never fully heal. Years later, I still hear the whispers on cold, silent nights, a reminder that some places hold darkness too deep to uncover. The Himalayas remain a place of beauty and mystery, their peaks towering as eternal sentinels guarding the secrets of those who dare to climb too high. If you ever find yourself venturing into the heart of the mountains, heed the warnings of those who have walked the path before you. Respect the land and the spirits that dwell within, for the shadows watch and wait, ready to claim those who challenge the ancient boundaries set by forces beyond our understanding. Story number 5. Whispers in the Wilderness. I never imagined that a simple camping trip would unravel the very fabric of my sanity. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless noise and ceaseless motion of city life, the idea of escaping to the serene, untouched wilderness of Wyoming seemed like a dream come true. My partner, Laura, and I had been planning this getaway for months, a chance to reconnect, away from the chaos and demands of our everyday lives. We arrived at the designated campsite in the late afternoon, the vast expanse of the forest stretching endlessly before us. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of damp soil. Our tent, a sturdy two-person model, was set up near a small clearing by a babbling brook. As we unpacked our gear, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced among the towering trees. The first night was peaceful. We sat around a small campfire, the flames flickering and casting a warm glow on our faces. Laura laughed as we shared stories and toasted marshmallows, the sounds of the forest creating a soothing symphony. The night sky was clear, the stars twinkling brightly above us, unspoiled by city lights. I felt a profound sense of contentment, the tranquility of nature wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. But as dawn broke the next day, a sense of unease began to settle over me. We woke to find our tent and all our equipment inexplicably moved more than 50 meters from where we had left them the night before. My first thought was that a strong wind had blown us, but the campsite was protected by dense foliage and rocky terrain that should have shielded us from such force. Laura and I exchanged worried glances, trying to rationalize the inexplicable shift. Determined not to let this strange occurrence ruin our trip, we decided to pack up and continue our hike deeper into the forest. As we ventured further from the clearing, I noticed that our compass was acting erratically, the needle spinning wildly before settling on directions that made no sense. Every path we took seemed to lead us back to the same spot we had left the previous night. Frustration mounted as we realized we were caught in some sort of unnatural loop. The days that followed were a nightmare of confusion and fear. No matter how far we walked, the forest seemed to mock us, guiding us back to our starting point. Our food supplies dwindled rapidly, and the oppressive heat of the Wyoming sun added to our growing desperation. We tried to stay optimistic, telling ourselves it was just a bizarre twist of nature, but deep down, we knew something was terribly wrong. By the fourth night, our situation had become dire. The once comforting sounds of the forest had transformed into eerie whispers that seemed to emanate from the very trees surrounding us. Laura insisted that we hear children laughing, their innocent giggles echoing through the darkness, while shadows danced just beyond the reach of our flashlight beams. I clung to her, the fear gnawing at me like a relentless tide. That night, sleep was elusive. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, intertwining with the sounds of our own restless breathing. Laura and I huddled together in the tent, the flimsy fabric offering little protection against the encroaching dread. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the cold air as we heard the unmistakable sound of scratching against the tent walls. My heart raced as I peered out into the inky blackness, trying to locate the source of the noise. Through the thin fabric, I saw them, two pairs of glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. The figures were tall and indistinct, their forms blending seamlessly with the shadows. They stood motionless, watching us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Laura grabbed my hand, her grip tight with fear. "We need to leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, and we both scrambled out of the tent, stumbling over each other in our haste to escape. As we backed away, the figures began to move, their steps silent but deliberate, circling us in a macabre dance. The children's laughter echoed through the trees, now joined by guttural growls that resonated with an otherworldly power. Panic surged through me as I realized we were being hunted by something beyond our understanding. We fled into the forest, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on us from all sides. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig felt like a death knell, signaling our inevitable doom. Our compass had long since failed, and every direction seemed to lead us deeper into the labyrinth of trees that held us captive. Exhaustion set in, our bodies aching from the relentless pursuit and the harsh conditions. As dawn approached, we stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin hidden among the dense foliage. Desperate for shelter, we forced our way inside, the door creaking ominously as we entered. The cabin was dark and musty, with signs of recent habitation despite its obvious neglect. We lit a small fire, the flickering flames offering a semblance of safety in the otherwise oppressive gloom. But our respite was short-lived. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more frantic than before. The children's laughter was now accompanied by anguished cries, filling the cabin with a cacophony of despair. The shadows outside the windows began to contort and shift, taking on grotesque forms that pressed against the glass as if trying to break free. I held Laura close, the fear anchoring us in our fragile sanctuary. Suddenly, the cabin door burst open, the wind howling through the gaps and sending a chill down my spine. The figures from the forest stood at the threshold, their eyes burning with an unholy light. One of them, a child with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression, stepped forward, reaching out a ghostly hand towards us. "Help us," it whispered, the words echoing with a haunting resonance. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she whispered back, "We don't know how." But the presence around us was overwhelming, the spirit's pain and longing seeping into our very souls. I felt an inexplicable urge to reach out, to offer comfort to these lost beings, even as fear gnawed at me from within. In that moment, the cabin seemed to transform, the walls closing in as the spirit's energy enveloped us. The whispers and cries became a symphony of sorrow, their collective pain creating a vortex that threatened to consume us. Desperate to escape, I grabbed Laura's hand and pulled her towards the door, but the spirit's grip was too strong, their presence suffocating our attempts to flee. Just as all hope seemed lost, a blinding light filled the cabin, the spirits' voices fading into the ether as the oppressive darkness lifted. The figures vanished, their sorrowful gazes lingering for a moment before dissipating into the night. Exhausted and traumatized, Laura and I collapsed onto the floor, the echoes of our encounter still reverberating in our minds. The next morning, we emerged from the cabin, the sun shining brightly through the trees as if nothing had happened. But the forest felt different now, the once welcoming wilderness now tainted by the horrors we had endured. We packed up our remaining gear, determined to leave Black Hollow behind us, but as we made our way back to our car, our compass failed us completely, rendering all sense of direction useless. We drove in circles, the road seemingly endless and indistinguishable, every turn leading us back to the same clearing where we had set up camp. The forest seemed to mock us, trapping us in an unending loop of fear and despair. Days passed without rest, our bodies and minds pushed to the brink as we struggled to find a way out of the labyrinthine wilderness. Eventually, we were found by a search party, exhausted and emaciated, our memories of the ordeal fragmented and hazy. The authorities were baffled by our accounts, unable to piece together the exact nature of our disappearance and return. All we could offer was the haunting memory of the glowing eyes and the children's laughter that had pursued us through the darkest nights. I left Black Hollow that day, the experience forever etched into my soul. Laura and I tried to rebuild our lives, but the shadows of that trip lingered, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The whispers in the wind and the echoes of our screams haunted our dreams, the memory of those lost souls a lingering presence that refused to fade. Years later, I still find myself drawn back to the stories of Black Hollow, unable to shake the feeling that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover. The experience taught me that nature's beauty can mask unspeakable horrors, and that sometimes the most terrifying shadows are born from the depths of human fear and sorrow. If you ever find yourself venturing into the remote wilderness, heed the warnings and respect the boundaries set by those who came before you. For in the heart of the forest lies a world unseen, where whispers linger and eyes watch from the darkness, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to uncover their eternal lament. Story number 6. Echoes across the abyss. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the bustling heart of Jakarta, surrounded by the relentless chaos of city life, the idea of spirits lingering in the shadows seemed more like a superstition than reality. But nothing could have prepared me for the night in 1947 that changed everything. I was a young fisherman, part of a small crew on the Sanggar Bahagia, a modest fishing vessel that plied the rich waters off the coast of Indonesia. Life at sea was simple yet demanding, the endless horizon both a promise and a challenge. Our days were spent casting nets and hauling in the catch, while nights were reserved for stories and the gentle lull of the ocean. It was late September, the air thick with humidity and the scent of salt. We had been out at sea longer than usual, driven by the promise of a bountiful catch after weeks of scarcity. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink as we navigated through unfamiliar waters. My captain, Pak Rahman, a seasoned sailor with a weathered face and unwavering resolve, guided us with steady hands. As darkness enveloped the sky, a thick fog began to roll in, muting the colors and silencing the sounds of the night. Pak Rahman slowed the engine, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Stay alert," he warned, his voice low and gravelly. "Fogs like this can be treacherous." We settled into a routine, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the occasional call of nocturnal birds, the only sounds breaking the silence. Hours passed without incident until one of the younger crew members, Joko, pointed towards the horizon. "Look there," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the stillness. Through the dense fog, a massive silhouette emerged, a ship unlike any we had ever seen. It was a grand vessel, its hull dark and imposing, with sails that seemed to shimmer under the pale moonlight. There were no lights on deck, and the silence around it was unnerving. Pac-Raman squinted, trying to make out any familiar markings. "That's no ordinary ship," Pac-Raman muttered, his grip tightening on the wheel. "It's been years since we heard tales of ghost ships, but I've never seen anything like this." Curiosity overcame caution, and Pac-Raman ordered us closer. As we approached, the details became more disturbing. The ship appeared abandoned, its decks empty and still. A foul stench of rotting flesh permeated the air, mingling with the salty breeze. My stomach churned, but there was no turning back now. We anchored the Sangar Bahagia beside the ghostly vessel, the water around us eerily calm. Pac-Raman motioned for us to board, his expression a mix of determination and unease. As we stepped onto the deck, the wooden planks groaned under our weight, echoing through the silent ship. The interior was desolate, shadows dancing in the dim light that filtered through the fog. The air was thick with the scent of decay, making it difficult to breathe. We explored cautiously, the eerie stillness pressing down on us. Suddenly, Joko stumbled upon a grand dining hall, its table set for a feast that never occurred. Dust-covered plates and tarnished silverware lay scattered, remnants of a forgotten time. My heart pounded as we ventured further, each step revealing more unsettling sights, empty cabins, torn sails, and personal belongings left behind as if the crew had vanished into thin air. It was then that Joko, ever the curious one, found an old camera resting on a table. "Look what I found," he called out, holding it up for us to see. "Be careful," Pac-Raman warned, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "We don't know what's left here." Ignoring the caution, Joko raised the camera and snapped a photo, the flash briefly illuminating the dark corners of the room. Almost immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature plummeted, and the once silent ship seemed to come alive with a chorus of screams. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of anguish that reverberated through the walls. Panic erupted among us as the screams intensified, echoing from every direction. Shadows twisted and contorted, taking on grotesque forms that seemed to reach out for us. Pac-Raman shouted for us to leave, but as we turned to flee, the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. "What's happening?" I cried, my voice trembling with fear. Pac-Raman struggled to open the door, but it remained firmly locked. The screams grew louder, and the shadows pressed in, their whispers filling the air with a sense of impending doom. Desperate, I grabbed Joko and pulled him towards another exit, but before we could reach it, a spectral figure materialized before us. It was a man, his face pale and eyes hollow, staring at us through the broken windows. "Why have you come?" he hissed, his voice echoing with a supernatural resonance. "We're sorry," Pac-Raman pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't mean to intrude." The figure's eyes seemed to pierce through me, and I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and anger. "You cannot leave," it whispered, the words sending chills down my spine. "You must join us." In a moment of sheer terror, we managed to break free, fleeing the haunted ship and scrambling back onto the deck of the Sangar Bahagia. The screams and shadows followed us, their presence relentless as we navigated back through the dense fog. The ghostly vessel seemed to loom over us, its malevolent gaze fixed upon our fleeing form. As we reached the safety of our own ship, the fog began to lift, revealing the vast expanse of the ocean under the pale light of dawn. Exhausted and traumatized, we watched as the ghost ship slowly disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind only whispers of its tragic past. The next day, we returned to the site, expecting to find our boat untouched. Instead, disaster awaited us. The Sangar Bahagia was engulfed in flames, the heat searing through the air even in the midst of a hot tropical day. The flames were unexplainable, spreading rapidly despite the lack of any obvious fuel source. We stood in disbelief, the only survivor among my terrified crew. As firefighters arrived and attempted to extinguish the mysterious blaze, all they found was the charred remains of our boat, with no sign of us. The only evidence of our presence was a single, haunting photograph found clutched in my hand. The image was blurry, but unmistakably, it showed dozens of ghostly figures standing on the deck of the Sangar Bahagia, their hollow eyes staring blankly into the void. I left the sea shortly after, the memory of that night etched into my soul. I tried to move on, but the nightmares persisted, the screams echoing in my mind and the image of those hollow eyes haunting my every waking moment. The truth of that ghost ship remained a mystery, a chilling reminder that some secrets of the ocean are best left undisturbed. Years have passed since that fateful encounter, but the scars remain. I often find myself gazing out at the vast expanse of the ocean, the waves whispering tales of the unknown. The ghost ship of Black Hollow serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the darkness that lurks beneath the surface, waiting to claim those who dare to uncover its secrets. If you ever find yourself sailing the remote waters of Indonesia, heed the warnings of the locals and respect the boundaries set by those who came before you. For in the depths of the ocean lies a world unseen, where shadows whisper and hollow eyes watch from the darkness, ready to draw you into their eternal embrace. Story number 7. Whispers Above the Desert. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless hum of the city, the idea of spirits lingering in the vastness of the sky seemed absurd. But that was before the night in the Nevada desert changed everything. It was 1985, and I had just logged my 500th solo flight. Flying was more than a job to me. It was a sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the world below faded into insignificance. That night, I was piloting a Cessna 182, heading westward across the barren expanse of Nevada. The moon was a sliver in the clear sky, casting a pale glow over the desert sands below. At 10,000 feet, the world was serene, the only sounds the steady hum of the engine and the occasional flap of wings from a passing nightbird. As I cruised along, my mind drifted to thoughts of home, my wife, Karen, and our 2 children, Emma and Jake. The flight was uneventful until an unexpected fatigue began to set in. The long hours in the cockpit, combined with the monotony of the night flight, were wearing me down. I rubbed my eyes, trying to stay alert, but sleep's heavy grip seemed unavoidable. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a soft, rhythmic knocking at the cockpit door. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced around, half expecting to see some trick of the light or the shadow of a cloud obscuring the moon. Probably just my imagination, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease. But the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing minute. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the door, willing it not to open. "This isn't funny," I whispered, my voice betraying the fear I felt creeping up my spine. The knocks turned into a steady rhythm, almost like a desperate plea. My rational mind raced, trying to find an explanation, another pilot up there, maybe, but that was impossible. I was alone. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for the door handle, my hands trembling. As I turned it slowly, the door creaked open, revealing a face so pale it seemed to glow in the dim cockpit light. The figure had no eyes, just smooth, featureless skin where eyes should have been. It stared at me, its presence cold and unsettling. My breath caught in my throat as I locked eyes with the void where its eyes should be. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice cracking. But the figure remained silent, its mouth opening and closing without producing a sound. The temperature in the cockpit plummeted, my breath visible in the freezing air. Panic surged through me as I realized this wasn't a hallucination. I was face to face with something beyond understanding. Without warning, the engine sputtered and died, the sudden silence more deafening than the roaring engine ever was. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to restart it, the darkness of the cockpit pressing in on me from all sides. The figure began to fade, its presence becoming less distinct, but the fear remained, anchoring me to the spot. I fumbled with the throttle, finally managing to get the engine humming again. Relief washed over me as I prepared for an emergency landing, the desert night now my only companion. The instrument panel flickered to life, but something was wrong. The altimeter showed a rapid descent, and I struggled to regain control, the plane tilting uncontrollably. "Not now," I cursed, fighting the pull of gravity as the aircraft spiraled downward. The ground rushed up to meet me, and with a violent jolt, the plane hit the desert floor, skidding across the sand before coming to a violent stop. Smoke billowed from the engine, and the cockpit was filled with the acrid scent of burning fuel. Heart still racing, I looked out the window, expecting to see the wreckage in the distance. Instead, there was nothing but the endless expanse of the Nevada desert, bathed in the pale light of the moon. No sign of the plane's destruction, no trace of the terrifying figure that had haunted my flight. It was as if the crash had never happened, leaving me alone in the vast, silent night. I unbuckled my seatbelt, the reality of my situation settling in. No immediate danger, no assistance, just me and the desolate desert. As I gathered my things, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was watching me from the shadows. Hours passed as I waited for daylight, the desert remaining unforgiving in its stillness. The night was cold, each hour stretching into an eternity. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but the memory of the eyeless face and the sound of its silent plea haunted me, refusing to let go. When the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, I made my way to the wreckage. To my astonishment, there was nothing to be found. The plane was gone, as if it had vanished into the night. No debris, no signs of the crash, only the untouched desert sands stretching out before me. Confused and desperate, I attempted to piece together what had happened. Had I truly crashed and then somehow been spared, or was this all a product of my traumatized mind? The lack of evidence made any explanation impossible, leaving me to grapple with the terrifying uncertainty of my own sanity. Weeks turned into months as I struggled to come to terms with the events of that night. Karen and the kids were supportive, but the isolation of my ordeal weighed heavily on me. I refused to speak of what I had seen, fearing disbelief and ridicule. The whispers of that night lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the inexplicable horror that had shattered my perception of reality. In time, I was released from my duties as a pilot, unable to reconcile the rational world I once knew with the supernatural terror that had invaded my flight. The haunting experience left scars that never fully healed, a shadow that loomed over every aspect of my life. I became a recluse, the fear of encountering the unknown keeping me away from the skies I once loved. Years later, the memory of that night remains vivid, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between the seen and the unseen. I often gaze up at the night sky, the stars twinkling innocently above, unaware of the darkness that can sometimes breach their light. The desert whispers still echo in my mind, their silent pleas a haunting testament to the night I faced the unknown and barely survived. If you ever find yourself flying alone in the vastness of the night, remember my story. Respect the solitude of the skies and heed the warnings that come not from the ground, but from the shadows that linger beyond the horizon. For sometimes, the most terrifying horrors are not born from the tangible world, but from the unseen forces that dwell just out of sight, waiting for a moment to reach out and claim their next victim.